Hi YouTube, Eric here. So today I'm going to teach you how to winterize an outboard boat in a climate where it's going to go below freezing and you're going to have a hard freeze. So I'm going to teach you some tips and tricks on having a successful winter storage and then also a successful spring start. So let me show you what I do. I begin by disconnecting the fuel line and pulling the fuel tanks out of the boat. Put a plastic bag over the loose end of your fuel line before you put it away for the winter. I then temporarily disconnect the fuel line at the engine and I plug in an old gas line and rig it so I can push the fuel out with the primer bulb out of the fuel line. This ensures that when I prime the carburetors in the spring, I will have fresh gas going in. I then reconnect my fuel line to the engine. As soon as I get my hands free. Now this one around. Then I come in and I remove, in this case, the baffles that I need, this baffle that I need to remove in order to gain access to the fuel drains and the carburetors. Draining the carburetors is hands down the best way to ensure you won't have any damage over the winter from fuel problems, clogging up jets, causing floats to sink. If you have a fuel injected engine, you can skip this part. They say you're supposed to fog the engine. You know what? I'd only fog the engine if you're going to leave it in a very, very humid area. And again, we're winterizing for northern climates where we freeze. Not southern climates where we might store a boat forever, because we can. I suppose we could store a boat forever here too. So at any rate, what we've now gained access to, this is a fuel drain, and that down there is a fuel drain. I may have to take off the throttle cable or the shift cable, or maybe both cables to gain access to that, but I want to pull those screws and tip the engine straight up and down and let these bowls drain. Okay, YouTube. So what I'm trying to do is stupid proof this so that I don't have to take off my shifter and throttle cable ever again. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a 1/2-inch hole in the bottom of this pan so that I have a screwdriver access. And then what I will do is plug it with a rubber grommet. This is perfectly acceptable, okay? This engine's a 1983 engine. So, to ease maintenance, make it simpler, I've got this gorgeous Mac Tools index of drill bits, but a lot of these drill bits have gotten dull, and I just haven't fiddled around with sharpening them. problem, it will fit right in there. And, oh, perfect. Perfect. Okay. Of course, now we don't want to drop this thing, so here my hand's going to have to blind you. One. The top one was always easy. Have little O-rings on them too, they're special. I don't know if you can see it, but the fuel's dripping on out. I'm going to tip this down level, this engine. And then we walk off for a little while, let this thing just drippy-do. Okay, so after we're satisfied that we got the gasoline out of the carburetor bowls, and I tipped the engine up a couple of times, and I made sure the engine was tilting towards the drain side, if you know what I mean. Make sure nothing else is coming on out of there. We can stick our bowl drains back in and button this up. And the idea here behind draining the carburetors is that when we put gas in this thing next spring, it's all fresh gas. And we've had little opportunity to attract water through humidity and condensation over the winter. And that's our goal, is to get this thing so it runs right off the bat in the springtime. First try. These screws don't have to be super tight. They are brass. They when you get a new in OMC, when you get a new full carburetor rebuild kit, you'll get new screws. So that's why these things look like they're in good shape. I rebuilt these carburetors last year right around this time. Okay, so now I'm going to button up the shift cable and the throttle cable, and I'm going to put the baffle back on. So what is nice about this is that I will never need to pull the throttle and the shift cables off again in order to get at the bottom carburetor's bowl drain. I'll still have to take off the vent to get at the upper carburetor, double barrel carburetor, but so be it. A little easier. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. Okay, so the second to last thing I do is I replace the gear oil in the lower unit. There are washers on these plugs. Look for them. In this case, mine just didn't come out. I want to pick that on out. Maybe it'll just stay there. All right, I'm going to make sure that I have a washer when I put that plug back in. And so you start out with pulling the bottom. And the reason why we do this is if the pilot seal has failed from like fishing line or anything in like that, we want to make sure we get the water out. And it doesn't look like I really have any water mixed up in this. Here's the seal. It's a little plastic seal. Sometimes they're paper, so they're fairly, I mean, Yamaha and Suzuki and all the engines have sort of slightly different variants. In a pinch, they'll all work for each other, though. So you let that drain. Okay, so then to fill a lower unit, you'll need to have some kind of crazy little adapter and a pump on an oil can, and I've got a couple of different kinds. This one's oily, and so this is the one I'm using, and it's kind of cheesy. No, it's not even kind of, it's totally cheesy. At any rate, all you do to fill this is to just start pumping until you see oil come out. And yeah, I'm using a different brand of oil here, so it's going to be a bluish green color. No big deal. In fact, this is probably a really good time to talk about oil. Okay? This is a Citgo marine oil, gear lube. It's good for all stern drives and Type C drives. And you read the back and you're like, what's that? And you, OMC C drives, Mercruiser, OMC Cobras, Volvo stern drives of Mercury, Evinrude, Johnson, Mariner, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Force Outboards. Basically everybody, right? Okay. And they don't tell you what's the rating. It just says it's marine. Well, it's a GL5 oil. This is Napa. It's the same thing, right? It's GL5. In this case, it says it's got a bunch of lower ratings. GL5 is an anti-foaming agent. When a gear oil hits water, how much it resists foaming. The resistance to foaming prevents blowing out seals like the pilot seal and whatnot. So in other words, if you find oil rated at GL5, just straight up mineral oil, that's good for your lower unit. You don't necessarily need to have some kind of special marine oil. Okay, I got another full quart. Nope, just started to come out. Okay, so once it starts coming out, make sure we have our plastic gasket on there, and we put our screw back in. I want to cross thread it, so I want to be kind of careful with this little rascal. And it doesn't have to be super tight, snug, but not super tight. All right, so now this has got a magnet plug on it. Okay, and if you remember right, their gasket is still in there, stuck. So now what we do is we pull this screw out. And the vacuum's going to tend to hold this thing in there. We're going to make sure our plug didn't fall out. I don't see it there. And we fiddle around with getting this one started too. There we go. And the seals are important for keeping the water out, you know what I mean? So that's that. Clean up our mess. And we pull the battery out.